one thing I see a lot with my friends, you know, being a 40-something woman, is that a lot of us hopefully are getting to the point where we accept ourselves and have that self-esteem coming from what we do. I'm a good mom. That's much more important to me than the way I look. But the way I look is affected by the things I do. So if I have too much wine one week and don't do my exercising, I sometimes feel like a failure because I think of all these people that are very athletic and very successful and how every day they get up and they exercise and they're motivated. But Darren said something really intriguing to me yesterday. And it's that we all have a tendency to have times where we don't do those things that we probably should or know we should. Does it happen with athletes? How does that work with an athlete?
It happens with athletes to a greater or lesser extent. I mean, most of the athletes I work with, it truly is a 24/7, 365 level of commitment, because every single thing, that extra pound they put on when they're taking a 2-week break is the extra pound they got to get rid of when they get back into training. So there is an element of having a lifestyle that is about being an athlete. Now that has a huge upside, and I'm sure that the general population would look at these people and see pictures of health and pictures of fitness, and that it just isn't the case. I mean, most athletes I deal with, where they're holding them together with sticky tape and an awful lot of prayer, because it is inherently an unhealthy pursuit to be an elite level athlete, because you're actually trying to put your body into positions and forcing yourself to go to places that just isn't overly healthy. So I think although there are lots of attributes you can look at as an athlete in terms of the way they approach their day-to-day business, the physical side and the health side isn't necessarily the part you should be focusing on, because that really is, there's a much more of a downside to having that lifestyle. Because I think that for the vast majority of the population, it's about balance, and it's about moderation, and it's about moderating your wine, if you can, Rach. Moderate your wine consumption.
Try.
You know, a little bit more exercise, and I don't think you're trying to become an Olympic champion. I mean, I think that that's the thing to talk about here. Little changes, if you sustain them over time, have huge consequences. And I think that that's what really the message that should be being put out there to people is that, you know, for the general population, is we're just trying to think, how can you make little changes? Because those little changes will eventually will reward you in a big way.
Right. They're sustainable, and they're realistic, and they're practical. And you know, one of the things I like about the whole message of little changes is, and I know Darren will probably be analyzing me like, oh, this girl. But like, one of the things I love to do is like I make my to-do list the night before I leave my office, right? And then all day long, all sorts of things come up that I do, right? Like so-and-so calls me and I have to call them back and get them something. Then I put that on my to-do list because I like to check it off. And then at the end of the day,
that's
excellent.
I think that's a really, I mean, that's a very goal-directed. I mean, the one thing I always say to people when they do that, though, is that you also need to take the next step, which is when you look at that to-do list, is you need to break it down into levels of importance.
Yes.
Because otherwise, you'll end up doing all the things that A, are easy, and
That's
B,
right.
that you can check off.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, you look at your list, and the 3 most important things, which really would have taken an awful lot more time and weren't quite as sexy and enjoyable, you didn't do them.
Right.
And then guess where they are the next day? They're right there again. I had an athlete once. It's a classic story. He was an all-American discus thrower and a potential Olympian, and he was so disorganized, it was quite incredible. So we used to sort of make lists, and this is right at the early days of my consulting, and I hadn't worked out yet that, you know, there's a difference between absolute importance and relative importance. And so his apartment was always spotless. I mean, it was remarkable. I'd never seen a male student athlete's apartment look like it. It was incredible. But he never got anything done. But he said, look at my list, and on his list every day was clean the apartment. And he would clean his apartment every single day. And he said, look, at least I did one thing. But I mean, to the point, I mean, this is, I think, another important point is absolute and relative importance. There was a study done at the University of Illinois where they went out and they just talked to a bunch of undergrads, and they said, is exercise important? And yeah, it was in the top 10 most important things that undergraduates at the University of Illinois said that defined who they were as students at the U of I. But the critical question is, okay, compared to studying, compared to socializing, not that anybody at the University of Illinois drinks, but compared to drinking and comparing to all these things, this is my alma mater, Compared to all those things, how important is exercise? And literally, it was dropped off the face of the earth. I mean, it just went. And it's the same thing with all of us. If you go out, 100 people, now maybe Nike's not a great example, but go down to downtown Portland today and grab 100 people and say, is exercise important? I guarantee you 99 of them will say, oh yeah. And then you say, do you exercise? No. So it's a question of relative and absolute importance. And I think that's again speaks to, it's more about a lifestyle change than it is about an hour block of time that you're going to go to a gym or go to a Y or do this. It's more about how can I find a way to changing my life so that I am more physically active, that I make some small but important nutritional changes. That is going to sustain your change.
So it becomes part of who you are, but not necessarily so much something you do.
Absolutely.
Not something you have to do, which I think a lot of people feel about having to go to the gym. Having to.
Oh, just using the word having to.
Exactly.
I have to. It's
a chore then, right? It's a chore.
Yeah, I mean, the motivation that's driving you to the gym is what we refer to as introjective motivation. It's guilt. Either internally or externally, I mean, it's guilt. And guilt's an incredibly powerful motive, but it's unsustainable again. I mean, I'm going because I feel guilty if I don't.
Right.
Well, I mean, who wants to do that? I mean, at the end of the day, after about 3 months, you're like, why am I doing this? And the only reason I'm doing it is because if I don't do it, I feel guilty.
Right.
I'll get over that.
Yeah.
A few days after, I get over it.
Right. So you have to find some joy.
Right.
Well, it's back to your point that you made on the first webinar about find something you enjoy. Go back, think about when you were more active, when you did connect, and find a way to sort of reignite that
right.
interest level. And a lot of it, again, I think, particularly for a lot of people who are probably going to be watching this videos, is do it with a friend. Do it we are a social animal. Mm-hmm. Do it with somebody that you enjoy being with. So and again, we're not talking about going out there and running a marathon. If it's just walking around a block and gradually increasing the amount of time and the frequency that you do it with people that you enjoy being around. It's another way. Hey, it's the physical manifestation of Facebook. You're actually going to connect with real people. Heaven forbid, we don't really want that. But heaven forbid, we can actually reconnect with real people and have real conversations. And actually do it in a way that makes sense as opposed to in 128 characters.
Exactly.